imagination. It feels irrational, unspiritual, or worldly. And creativity and the arts seem like dangerous territory. They lead some people to dark places. So Christians, some of them, take refuge in the rational, the logical. They assume that Christian truth always needs to be propositional. Now, what's been helpful for me is advice from Richard Foster. Foster says that both human rationality and human creativity are both fallen, and both need to be retained. It's not automatically better to be rational than to be imaginative. Rational intellectualism also has its own pitfalls. Detachment, arrogance, atheism. Yes, so yes, the arts can be fallen, but they can also be redeemed. God can redeem both the rational and the imagination. God can use both for His glory. Jesus' great commandment says we should love God with all our heart, soul, mind, strength. And you guys are unpacking, what does it mean to love God with our minds? To think Christianly, to have a Christian worldview. The temptation for many of us is that we only love God with half our mind, the left brain, and not the right brain. And I know that neurologists say it's not that simple. It's not just the strict right brain, left brain, logical, imaginative thing. But for the sake of illustration, we tend to say that we tend to validate left brain logical things in the church, like apologetics or doctrine. We've missed out on loving God with all our minds, the creative, the artistic. This is why C.S. Lewis was so effective. He wasn't a professional theologian. He was a literature professor. And his writing integrated left and right brain. And Chronicles of Narnia, Screwtape Letters, Great Divorce, Till We Have Faces. He fused together apologetic argument and mythic storytelling. He appealed to both the right brain and the left brain simultaneously. One of the strongest apologetics for God is our capacity to appreciate beauty. When the psalmists talk about the heavens declaring the glory of God, he's not making an appeal to the rational. It's not a logical argument. They're appealing to our intuitive grasp of God's power and majesty as declared through the beauty of God's creation. Now, I want to spend the rest of our time looking at a key passage, Exodus 35. This is the building of the tabernacle. Exodus 35, 30, and following. Then Moses said to the Israelites, "See, the Lord has chosen Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, and He has filled him with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills to make artistic designs for work in gold, silver, and bronze, to cut and set stones, to work in wood, and to engage in all kinds of artistic crafts. And He has given both him and Oholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan, the ability to teach others. He has filled them with the skill to do all kinds of work as engravers, designers, embroiderers, and blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, and weavers, all of them skilled workers and designers. So Bezalel, Oholiab, and every skilled person to whom the Lord has given skill and ability to know how to carry out all the work of constructing the sanctuary are to do all the work just as the Lord has commanded." The word of the Lord. There's so much in this passage that we could spend hours unpacking. So let me just hit a few highlights. First of all, the Spirit of God is at work in creative work. There are echoes here of Genesis 1, when the Spirit of God hovers over the work of creation. That same Holy Spirit is at work in Bezalel for creative work. This is big. The Spirit of God that created the universe is the same Spirit of God that is at work in us in the ongoing work of creation, creating through us. The Holy Spirit isn't always very obvious in the Old Testament, but here He is for the purpose of artistic design work, for metalworking, stonework, woodworking. This is spiritual work, Holy Spirit work, and this art is very concrete and practical. It's architectural design work, it's civil engineering, it's contracting and building construction. It's not just theoretical, it's the logistical and organizational work needed for implementation and execution. There's business administration going on here, operations work, and all of it counts as creative. All of it is the Spirit at work. Have you ever gotten so wrapped up in something you're working on that you lose all sense of time? Has this ever happened to you? It's when you're in the zone, when you're working on something you love, whatever it is, songwriting, scrapbooking, whatever. And what's interesting is that athletes and artists both talk talk about this, being in the zone, being in the flow. And when everything just clicks and you feel like, yes, this is what God has put you on earth to do, you can feel the Holy Spirit working through you. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, if you're pursuing the creative work that God has called you to do and gifted you, you know what I'm talking about. It's sometimes when I'm playing piano or I'm just messing around and I lose all track of time. Sometimes it happens when I'm writing. Something comes off the page and I have no idea where that came from. It's like, oh, wow. And I'm a P on the Myers-Briggs, so I tend to just sort of write at random and have a whole mess of stuff and then organize it later. And what's interesting to me is that sometimes I feel that zoneness in the random creating part, but other times I feel the zone when I'm editing and revising, which seems to be kind of mundane work, but the Holy Spirit is working there too to help me say, that's where things are supposed to go. So think about the times that you feel that kind of zoneness. Listen to that and pay attention to that. Look for patterns. God may be telling you something about the creative gifts He wants you to use. There's a book by Parker Palmer called Let Your Life Speak. And he talks about how your vocation and calling emerge out of how God created you to be. So, and when Palmer was a kid, he loved airplanes. He wanted to be a pilot. And so he wrote this little book where he drew pictures of airplanes and described them all and stapled it together and made this little booklet. And years later, he's digging through some old boxes. And he finds this little booklet. And he realized, I didn't want to be a pilot. I wanted to be an author. He's been a lifelong educator, teacher, and writer. And he realized even as a kid, he was already teaching, educating, and writing. So look for things that were significant in your childhood, those childhood experiences of creative work. When did you feel God's Spirit at work? Listen to that. Read your life story like it's a book or a movie. Where's the plot going? What themes emerge? What plot twists do you have along the way? Back at the Exodus passage, another important thing here is that Moses publicly affirms Bezalel's creative work. Moses said to the Israelites, "See, the Lord has chosen Bezalel for this work." Moses publicly affirms the importance and the value of creative work. He validates it. He names Bezalel's gifts and confirms that these are from God. This says something to us about the importance of leaders and mentors who call out our gifts and affirm our art. Because many of us come from families and churches that did not affirm creative work, especially as careers. Our parents, Asian parents, might appreciate classical music or theater, but do they typically want us to pursue it as a career? Not usually. They want us to do the doctor lawyer thing. We have this Asian American hierarchy, this pecking order. At the top is medicine, law, engineering, maybe business, but then creative work. Fine arts, film, drama, photography. They don't know what to do with that. Our folks might say that that's okay as a hobby, but not as a career. And sometimes our parents affirm the arts for the wrong reasons. How many here played violin as a kid? How many played piano? And some other instrument? And how many were forced against your will to perform something for a family reunion or after church? My Tony's church did this. After Sunday lunch, all the parents would get all the kids together and we'd all have to play something on the violin or piano. And it wasn't because they were publicly affirming our arts and the gifts or anything. They just wanted to compete with each other and show off their kids. You know what I mean? I can't use that illustration like for a non-Asian audience. They don't understand. I took violin lessons as a kid. I just hated it. I was no good. And my elementary school didn't have an orchestra. They only had a band. So I had to play along with the band, and I was the only stringed instrument. It was so uncool. I felt like such a loser. So as soon as the music requirement was dropped, it was over, I dropped it. On the other hand, I also took piano lessons throughout elementary school, and that wasn't too bad. Although I was usually too hyper a kid to sit still and practice every day. So I quit in junior high, but then I picked it up again in high school because I was jealous of all my friends that could play really well. And so I would buy my own sheet music of stuff I actually liked. So music off